Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the Waste and Recycling Information event for Pleasanton businesses. My name is Becky Hopkins. I'm assistant to the city manager for the city of Pleasanton, and I'll be serving as your MC this morning. Today we have a number of presentations to share with you about waste and recycling, and after each presentation, we'll have a brief time for questions and answers. So let's get started. I would like to introduce the local leaders of the 21st century and Jill Buck, CEO of the Go Green Initiative. In 2002, Jill founded the Go Green Initiative, a nonprofit that is a global leader in environmental education, operating in all 50 US states, 73 countries, and on 5 continents. In 2004, Jill established Buck Consulting, which helps businesses go green and achieve profitability through sustainability. Jill is the host of Go Green Radio and is co-author of the book, 47 Things You Can Do for the Environment. Jill Buck is an alumna of the University of Illinois, and after graduation was commissioned a naval officer, and she holds a Master's of Science in Education. So Jill.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. In fact, 2 years and 11 months ago, I brought students from Amador Valley High School to an event just like this that the city put on to talk about recycling and the new mandatory recycling ordinance. And at that time, we knew recycling was a great idea. We knew that the state of California had laws that were going to be enforced. But what we didn't know at that time was that there was about to drop a geopolitical bomb in the middle of our waste system in the United States of America and across the world. And so today I'm bringing back some students from Amador Valley High School to talk about National Sword. And this piece of legislation that came out of Beijing that was started to be enforced in January of 2018 has changed everything. It's changed the entire game, and it's trickled down to every municipality, including Pleasanton, and impacted us. So we're going to be talking today about, we'll start with the big picture, what happened in China and how it's coming down to us, and then the city has some other presenters that are going to be going on about what the city is doing to respond to National Sword and why recycling is a little bit different than it used to be when we were here the last time. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today. Her name is Jessica. She's a senior at Amador Valley High School. She's also the president of a program that is sponsored by the Go Green Initiative for high school students called Local Leaders of the 21st Century. And she's going to begin. So bring it on, Jessica.
Hi everyone, so my name is Jessica, like Mrs. Buck said, and today I'll be talking about what National Sword is. So if you want to recycle an item, like a plastic bottle for example, and you say, I'm going to recycle this bottle, typically we mean that we're going to toss the item into the blue bin. From there, our recycling is taken to the local recycling center on Bush Road. And you might think that recycling, in the sense that old materials will be turned into new products, takes place at the Pleasanton Recycling Center. But in fact, at local recycling centers like ours, plastic bottles or paper or other materials are typically, they only undergo basic sorting. And instead, they'll be packaged into bales and loaded into shipping containers, where they used to be shipped abroad to China, where the real recycling in that the old materials would be made into new products would take place. And for decades, this was our system. Local recycling is sent abroad where it's actually recycled, and our relationship with China was the backbone of the US recycling system. But in 2018, one policy changed all of this, and that policy is called National Sword. It's a policy passed by the Chinese government that set a 0.5% contamination limit, which is very hard to reach. And contamination is basically when something that can't go into the recycling, like a banana peel for instance, gets in there. So basically, with such a high contamination limit, it essentially became a ban on the import of most recyclables. And some of the reasons for this was that the contamination was so severe, investigative journalists have found things like medical waste inside the recycling that was being sent over. It was damaging recycling workers' health, and additionally, because recycling is sort of a cottage industry in the places we export to, the environmental regulations are quite lax, causing the passing of this policy. So this policy left the US, as well as Canada, Europe, Japan, Australia, pretty much all these countries that export their waste, it left us all scrambling for solutions. Because now China, which used to take in a lot of our recyclables, we had nowhere to send our recycling. So as a result, we started exporting our recycling to countries that would still take this, like Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and even India. But soon enough, those countries also started implementing their own bans on the import of most recycling. And they cited similar reasons as China when China passed National Sword. They were also faced with heavy contamination, and it was sort of disrupting local recycling efforts as well. And at this point, it was kind of becoming clear that maybe exporting our recycling wasn't exactly the ideal way of going about this. But still, we don't have concrete solutions. So for now, recycling is still being exported, this time to countries like Cambodia, Senegal, Ecuador, and even Turkey, which is one of our NATO allies. With this ban, various environmental, economic, and public health issues that are associated with the way that we go about recycling currently have been sort of thrust into the global spotlight. With National Sword, we are encouraged or almost forced to confront and reevaluate our understanding of what safe, sustainable, and economical recycling should look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, our next speaker is also a senior at Amador Valley High School, and it's my pleasure to introduce Carolyn. Come on up.
Excuse me. National Sword's effects cannot be ignored on the local level. If Pleasanton residents and businesses continue to send contaminated recycling to our materials recycling facilities, or MRF, we could be creating more issues instead of resolving them. Firstly, in order to fully separate contamination and recycling, MRFs must run the same load multiple times, unnecessarily increasing costs without improving efficiency. Secondly, if waste is too contaminated for export, then it may have to be stockpiled. It may have to be stockpiled in bales at MRFs without further viability. Additionally, contaminated recyclables that are not shipped could end up in landfills. And finally, contaminated recycling could result in less lucrative markets than what we had in China before National Sword. This means that the costs of recycling may be higher, and we could end up seeing raised price levels for businesses and MRFs struggling to stay in business. Ultimately, because of our carelessness in sorting basic recyclables, the resources and profit that came from the usefulness of recycling have been severely diminished. If we can come together as a community to be more aware of what we put into our blue bins, we can restore the value of recyclables and become a more environmentally conscious, greener city. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. And now I'll bring forth one of our juniors at Amador Valley High School to talk about the next impact of local sword, and her name is Ela. Come on down, Ela.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm going to be talking about what's being done at the federal level to kind of address the national sword issue. So after the U.S. was, sorry about that. After the U.S. was suddenly informed about national sword and China's new policies on recycling, there was kind of like an uncertainty among environmentalists, government officials, and even citizens due to the fact that the United States had an insufficient domestic infrastructure for recycling all of the waste that it produced. Municipal recycling programs, just like ours, were and still are suffering due to an influx in the amount of waste coming into the centers and that center's inability to process all of it. So you might be wondering what the country is doing to solve this issue. Well, many recycling and solid waste organizations, along with the US EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency, are dedicating large amounts of their resources and staff towards identifying solutions to support recycling in the US. The US EPA held its very first recycling summit in November of 2018 to discuss possible plans and measures that could be taken. The EPA is also attempting to support the development of alternative markets outside of China, as Jessica mentioned. An alternative market would be other countries that we could ship our waste to, but as Jessica said, all of the countries are putting bans on what can go in and what can be shipped, so the development of these markets might not happen at the timelines for the implementation of certain policies like contamination policies and things like that. But another way that people are combating this issue is through a program called Closed Loop Fund. CLF was founded in 2014, and its goal is to help cities and organizations build new recycling plants and similar waste structures. Closed Loop Fund has partnered with many big companies like Coca-Cola, Walmart, Starbucks, and even Amazon, among many others, that want to invest their money in new waste infrastructure and gain some of the profit made at these new recycling centers. Things are being done at the federal level to combat this issue, but any actions that could be taken at the state, county, or even city level are going to be the ones that matter the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Ela. Good job. We've got another junior from Amador Valley High School, Sujana. Come on down.
Okay, good morning everybody. Now, just as Ela mentioned, while National Sword is certainly a nationwide issue, it's essential to focus on why this issue is important locally and to understand what is being done by state and county officials. Now, in the state of California, to begin, CalRecycle, a state government organization, has taken the first steps when it comes to addressing the issue. They have formed a statewide commission on recycling markets and curbside markets, which will convene for the first time by July 1st, 2020. It aims to make policy recommendations in order to meet landfill diversion and market development goals and identify materials that are collected in local recycling and organics programs. Second, CalRecycle has initiated grants and loans to finance new infrastructure or facilities to process fiber, plastics, and glass. And this is especially important when considering their potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which is always a critical issue. Third, the Recycling Market Development Zone similarly encourages new and existing businesses to use recyclable materials in their products. CalRecycle provides product marketing, technical assistance, and additional loans to California businesses. And in turn, they're able to appeal to both the economic and environmental interests of California institutions. Lastly, CalRecycle itself continues to pursue recyclable packaging material management and reducing waste in order to reduce recycling contamination overall. As high levels of contamination is part of the reason China implemented the National Sword issue in the first place, this practice is key to getting to the heart of the problem. Now it's time to focus at home. In light of these changes, counties across the state are following suit. And right here in Alameda County, Stop Waste has coordinated a regional task force dedicated to sharing information and providing recommendations to local business owners. Unity among diverse groups of people, such as government officials and local waste haulers, plays a really key role in this force. And most importantly, Alameda County's efforts go right down to the individual citizen. They aim to promote one thing. Residents and businesses alike can all take steps to keep their recycling clean, especially minimizing paper waste. And in turn, everyone plays an essential role in the environmental health of California. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujana. And last but not least, our youngest member of the team, a sophomore at Amador Valley High School, Sahana. Come on down.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. So, we've heard about all of the problems and how it affects us in our state, county, and city levels. But what exactly can local businesses such as yourselves do to solve the problem? The first major step that any business can do to get their recycling prices lower is with the source, in education. Namely, just educating your coworkers on what's going on. Resources by Stop Waste, a local business dedicated to teaching Alameda County businesses, schools, and communities about proper waste management, has an ample amount of physical and electronic resources. I put 2 links on there if you'd like to take a picture of them or just write them down. I also saw a lot of resources on the table outside right before the presentation. So the first thing that we all know when it comes to waste management is that it isn't just about sorting your waste properly, it's about recycling what you can. I found a really helpful infographic on what exactly businesses such as yourselves can do. The first is to continue recycling, or if you haven't, start recycling. Putting that effort in shows that you're already trying to help the environment. The second is knowing what goes in which bin. We all know that the reason we're here is because of National SOAR's implementation on putting a ban on all that contaminated recycling. So knowing that at a local level, just a little bit of proper waste management can help in the long term. And the third and final step, and what I consider the most important, is reducing usage of products. Paper usage is the example that Stop Waste uses just because a lot of businesses use quite a lot of paper, but this could apply to anything. If I'm at a Mexican restaurant and I'm eating my food with a paper plate, plastic utensils, and napkins, rather than having all of that waste, I could just have reusable materials. That may seem more expensive for the business short term, but in the long term, it also saves a lot of money while also contributing to the environment. So that is our presentation on National SOAR. Are there any questions?
So it's not easy for high school students to get up and talk to adults about these kinds of things, but they're pretty courageous and they've studied really hard on this issue. Are there any questions about National SOAR or about their presentation? They did such a great job. All right, well thank you, Becky, for having us here today. It was our pleasure to participate in this event. Thank you.